This video has been brought to you by the generous support of Ground News.
Ground News.
Ground News.
Ground News.
Check them out at groundnews.com.
Ground News. Ground News.
Ground News.
Ground News.
Thanks, Ground News.
That's why I use Ground News.
What's with everyone plugging Ground News? Some of my favorite political YouTubers, even ones that never advertised before. Non-political YouTubers. Some of my not-so-favorite political YouTubers are too. What's the deal? Why does everybody trust them all of a sudden? How do they even determine right, left, and center? And I mean, sure, they apparently trust Ground News, but can we? These are the questions I intend to answer right after a message from our sponsor, Ground News. Nah. What's up, everyone? How's it going? Well, the way I figure it, if we want to figure out whether or not we can trust these guys, we got to look into a few things. How it's funded, and what their methodology is. So let's check it out. So this is Ground News' About page. What is Ground News? Ground News is a platform that makes it easy to compare news sources, read between the lines of media bias, and break free from algorithms. We'll see. If we scroll down, we'll get a little more information. Blah, blah, blah. And I didn't see anything about who they are. Our team. So we've got our team. Learn more about the history of Ground News, and it gives us... This is nonsense. This is nonsense. That's not what I asked for. Since I didn't find what I wanted in their About page, let's go to their frequently asked questions. Who owns and operates Ground News? Ground News is a small team of 18 media outsiders based in Ontario, Canada. Ground News is co-founded by siblings Harleen Kaur, ex-NASA, and Sukh Singh, ex-Bain. I don't know what Bain is, but if I search for it, we got Global Management Counseling Firm. Bain & Company is an American management consulting company. And Bain Capital, one of the world's leading multi-asset alternative investment firms. So far, that's not looking great. I'm pretty sure any one of those companies would want to say in what's considered bias or not. Ground News is backed by a handful of mission-aligned, independent individual investors with no ties to corporate media, big tech, or government affiliations. In addition to our team, Ground is supported by our community of subscribers who resonate with our team's mission to improve the online news environment. You can learn more about us here. And this just brought us back to the About page. What the hell? So, a group of 18 investors, but it doesn't really tell us who. And, an ex-Bain employee. Ex-NASA, too, which is government affiliated. I mean, I kind of trust the NASA thing since it's a science-based deal, but, you know. So, yeah, ex-Bain, 18 investors, we don't know who they are. I mean, what's the deal with that? They claim to not be affiliated with, like, governments or media or any of that, but don't really give us any proof. They just loop us back to the About page. So, I don't know. Don't really know if I can trust them yet. After a little more digging around, I did find some more stuff that was, like, about them, but it didn't really help much. So, they got this social media blind spotters, and it says, see our tool, read our methodology. And it brings me to this blind spotter methodology, and it says who we are. And blah-de-blah, it just says, like, what they do, not really who they are. Run by a team of 7 industry outsiders. They don't say who these industry outsiders are, how they're outsiders, not affiliated with any of this stuff. I mean, honestly, I don't think they can say this legally, but there's always ways to kind of get around the truth. Word things a certain way. Have loose connections instead of direct connections. Most of the company is owned by the team, and the majority of our funding comes from paid subscribers. That is good to know, but it says visit our About and Testimonials page. I don't know what a Testimonials page will do, but, you know, I don't think people's words are going to tell me who they are or who they're funded by. So again, I mean, so yeah, that's a little weird. On one page it says 18, here it says 7. They do say they're not affiliated with media or tech. But I mean, what other companies are they affiliated with? What other industries? I mean, They do say they are mostly funded by paid subscribers, but who else funds them? And what does mostly mean? Is mostly like most of the people who fund it are subscribers? Because, I mean, that could be little $5, $10 donations and stuff. And like one or two donors of millionaires or billionaires. So I don't really trust that. Well, yet again, back to their FAQ, I'm not really seeing anything on here. Does Ground have a political agenda? Ground has no political agenda and only presents the news, blah, blah, blah. I mean, it just tells us that they don't. How do we know that? I mean, come on, dude, for real. They have their own tool to determine who owns news media sources, and they don't tell us who owns them or how they're funded. That's pretty sus. Well, at the very least, let's take a look at the founders. So we got Harleen Kaur. If I Google her, there's some Indian clothing, an Indian bridal store. Her LinkedIn, we'll take a look at that. Oral surgery, clothing, there's not much. And would you look at that, her profile is not public. Let's try Sukh Singh. Well, it looks like there's a bunch of Sukh Singhs, so there's no way to know. Oh, let's try to put Bain. LinkedIn, Crunchbase, Ontario, Canada. Okay, Rocket Reach. Ground News, Snapwise, Bain and Company. What is Snapwise? Mobile app lets you see anywhere in the world real time. Okay, so he owns a mobile app. I don't know what that means, but he's definitely got private interests. Look at this. Sukh Singh brings experience from previous roles at UCIC by Snapwise, Bain and Company, Procter & Gamble, and Siemens. So yeah, we have no idea what's up with those two. I mean, of the information I was able to find on my own, I discovered that one of the co-founders has worked for quite a few companies who would definitely have an interest in skewing how news was rated. So, not looking good, Ground. If you got nothing to hide, why don't you just post it all on your site? You're supposed to be in the business of media transparency. Alright, well, as far as their funding and who owns them, I don't know. As far as their founders go, one of them there's no information on, and one of them has worked for several companies that would probably have an interest in skewing the so-called bias of news. Not looking good so far, Ground News. Let's see if their methodology is their saving grace. Back to the About page, hopefully it's on there. Learn more about methodology. The bias and factuality ratings are determined using 3 independent news monitoring organizations: All Sides, Ad Fontes Media, and Media Bias Fact Check. Alright, I guess we gotta check out those 3 companies now. I did find on that one page with the social media blind spot, if we scroll down pretty much to the bottom, our methodology. In order to pull the data, the tool parses through an account's last 3,200 tweets and records interactions with news content that have a bias rating. So basically it uses their own ratings, which we already have to check out those 3 other companies in order to find out how they rate them. Oh, Joe Rogan has a news diet that's comprised of 61% left-leaning news? I'm sure there's no way to verify that fact. All Sides, Ad Fontes Media, and Media Bias Fact Check. The average rating of 3 independent news monitoring organizations: All Sides, Ad Fontes Media, and Media Bias Fact Check. Their own methodology. Well, obviously we got to take a look at what they think the far left and right are. These publications tend to reflect the policy positions of the most extreme left-leaning party members. Left-leaning party members. The most extreme left of the party? I mean, that's like Bernie Sanders and AOC. I wouldn't call them the far left. I'd call them the left. They are strongly biased towards liberal causes through story selection and/or political affiliation. Alright, seriously, enough said. Liberal causes? Liberal is by no means the far left. Liberal is liberal. It's center to center right, if anything. There is a bit of a left center side to liberalism, but it's not far left. Liberal is dead center. So I don't really think we need to read any more about what they think the far left is. It's pretty obvious. They mean extremely liberal. And so for the far right, we have these publications tend to reflect the policy positions of the most extreme right-leaning party members. I mean, party members. Although I will say on the right, the party members are far more what I would call extreme right, although they're not as far right as you can get. Thank God. They are strongly biased towards conservative causes through story selection and or political affiliation. Conservative causes. So with that out of the way, this is definitely like America-centric party politics. So yeah, what they mean by far left is the far left of elected officials, far left of the Democratic Party. Far right is far right of the Conservative Party, far right of the Republican Party. So that's totally fine as long as you keep that in mind. Everything they consider from far left all the way to far right is definitely going to be within the American Overton window. And in case you don't know what an Overton window is, this is an extremely simplified version of what an Overton window is. We got unthinkable left, unthinkable right. We'll call this like Stalin. And we'll call this like Hitler. Popular, and whatever is the most popular becomes policy. I mean, we all know that's not true. Whatever has the most financial backing becomes policy. Well, with that being said, I will say the American political spectrum, the elected Congress and elected Senate and our presidents are fairly center-right. Let me show you how the 2020 presidential candidates stacked up on the political compass. Now, you may not remember all these people, but you should recognize a few. Here is Bernie Sanders, Tulsi Gabbard. We got Amy Klobuchar. Here's Biden over here. Cory Booker, de Blasio, Warren, Buttigieg, Yang. Now, I don't completely agree with where they put all this. This is just the opinion of somebody. Sanders and Gabbard. I think we all know Tulsi Gabbard has no political compass. And Sanders, I honestly wouldn't even call that far left. He's left, but he's more like on the line. Regardless of where this person decided to put these candidates, you'll notice they're all center right. We have left, right, authoritarian, libertarian. We're just focused on the left versus right, which in itself shows you a flaw in Ground News's ratings. They've got left through right. They don't have any libertarian or authoritarian, which is how many laws and how hard they crack down, as in authoritarian, or libertarian, how much there are no rules and you can do whatever you want whenever you want. Ground News factuality score is an overall assessment. Ad Fontes and media bias fact check. We will get to them. Ownership categories. The ownership categories for each news source were created by Ground News. We researched, analyzed, and hand-coded from all these different outlets. Our ownership investigation. Why does ownership matter? Conflict of interest. Concentration. This says nothing. This says absolutely nothing. And so yeah, there was no information about how they organized the ownership, but I am guessing most of that information is free publicly, but it would be nice if they kind of told us how they went about determining who owns what and gave us their source. So with all this being said, their methodology is a hodgepodge. Like, they don't tell us how they do their own stuff that they source themselves, and the rest of it they offload to 3 other companies. So let's take a look at those guys. Well, first on the list is All Sides. Here's their About page. Free people from filter bubbles so they can better understand the world and each other. Our biases in funding, well, isn't that great? We are also transparent about our ownership, finances, biases, and partners. Now that's what I like to see. How honest are they being here, though? ownership information. Well, they certainly made it easy. Much easier than Ground News did. Co-founded by John Gable. They tell them what their bias is. We'll see how they determine that in just a minute. Our revenue sources, online subscriptions and donations, accounted for 23% of All Sides revenue in 2022. Most our revenue came from a variety of client services in news, bias, education, dialogue, and technology. 72%. That makes 95% from subscription and what they're selling, which is the information. So that right there is 95% of it. Just subscription and what they sell for like education. It goes on to say, but they basically just sell the information to education outfits, media outfits, and of course companies want to know what's biased and what's not. So let's see where that other 5% comes from. Advertising accounted for a small amount of revenue, about 4%. Now that math ain't quite mathin'. 95% and 4% is only 99%, but I'm willing to give them the benefit of the doubt because decimals and such. We apply our own advertising standards to prevent conflicts with our credibility. This includes not permitting political advertisements. Well, let's see what those advertising standards are. So they just are self-policing on their advertisement standards. And their business model. All Sides was owned by 28 different people, 3 co-founders, maintaining majority ownership and control of the sole members of the board of directors. Well, I will have to say, All Sides doing a much better job than Ground News, showing us how you're funded and who owns you. So let's move on to their methodology. All Sides editorial review, a multi-partisan panel of 6 or more people across the political spectrum. Our panelists are trained to spot common types of media bias, blind bias surveys, third-party data, independent reviews, multiple methods. We'll take a look at those in just a minute. Each panelist has self-rated their bias using our bias quiz rating, which it looks like they just determine what they think is left, right, or center. So that's definitely a subjective thing. We all have our own ideas of what left, right, and center are. So let's go back to these multiple methods.
All Sides has created a patented, fair, transparent process to rate the media bias of hundreds of news outlets and writers. We assess each media source and rate them as far left, center, lean right, or far right, allowing you to quickly identify different perspectives. All Sides uses many methodologies to determine bias, including the blind bias survey, gathering people from all parts of the political bias spectrum and having them read and rate articles blindly, without telling them who wrote the article or which media outlet it came from. Then we take the average bias rating of several articles from a given media outlet for our final bias rating. Another powerful method we use is the editorial review. Focus groups of people with multiple political viewpoints who review the works of a media outlet and come to a consensus on its bias. We also look at credible third-party data, including academic research by top universities. Finally, what you say matters. We gather community feedback on our site every day, including hundreds of thousands of votes on our bias ratings. Our final bias ratings aren't determined by these votes, so they can't be gamed or falsified by any group. But we do analyze those votes for input and look for warning signs that our current bias ratings might be off. All Sides is constantly evolving our media bias engine. The more you participate, the better our ratings will be, and the better our news coverage will be. Go to allsides.com to get involved.
Well, I sped that up a little bit just for time's sake, but that was pretty legit understanding of what their methodology is. I'd say it's a pretty good methodology, and they are far more open about it than Ground News is. So good job, All Sides. So yeah, I'd say overall, All Sides is pretty good. Their self-checking on what they allow on advertising is, it's better than most. But I mean, all companies, all investors inherently have a political agenda of some sort. And as far as their self-assessment sheets go, I'm not sure if I really like that. Maybe they would ask more questions about how do you feel about this topic? Are you for or against? Rather than do you think you're left, right, or center? And then they can determine which stances on which issues make you right or left leaning. With that said though, good job, All Sides. I think they're doing a much better job than Ground News. I'm kind of glad Ground News relies on them. So let's move on to the second one they mentioned, Adfontes. So here is Adfontes Media's About page. First off, I want to talk about the Public Benefit Corporation. Being a public benefit corporation means we are a for-profit business with a stated public mission, which is to rate all the news to positively transform society. How true is that? And right here it basically says, yes, that's exactly true. Along with their fiduciary responsibility in maximizing shareholder value, they also have the responsibility of the advancement of their intended public benefit goal. The purpose of the corporation and public benefit intended must usually be stated in the company's formation documents and undergo auditing and assessments. So, pretty legit, although it is still for profit. The founder, and unless she's also the owner, I don't really care. How we are funded. Again, Ground News. Your own sources know to do this. Why don't you? For-profit company. Blah, 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 blah. Suffice it to say, a lot of fundraising, including from Stout Street Capital, DCA Asset Management, Glenn Nelson Center's Horizon Fund. Well, that's a fund. We Funder. Okay, so let's check. These guys are startup founders. Now, these are just regular investors. They don't have any inherent bias one way or another, but they do need to make profit. They do need to get a return on that investment. So this company is under pressure to make sales one way or another. Just a little something to keep in the back of your mind. And cool, these guys too have a video, which I will probably speed up. Methodology overview. Just give it a click. All right, that seemed fairly legit. I mean, it looked like just this one pot of people, and I'm not sure how they got their left, center, right labels. Let's see if we can find out. A little further down the page, it says, keep in mind that this rating system currently uses humans with subjective biases to rate things that are created by other humans with subjective biases. So overall, I like all sides methodology way better. This is reliant on 3 people. It does seem like they discuss with each other and like overall agree on where to rate it and everything. And they're trained, and it gives all the information about how that's done, which is great. I love all the information, but there are no like checks and balances that I'm seeing just yet. I'll keep digging. And once I look into this white paper of theirs here, in political leanings, it says, we lean heavily on their own sense of political identity. Now that means that these ratings are extremely biased based on what these 3 people can come up with. I'm not sure how many times they go over the same bit of information, but I doubt they can double check all the articles they read more than once. Some of them maybe, but I'm sure most of the time it's one pod per article. Alright guys, I know this is dense. We're almost done. I'll speed run through media bias fact check, and then we'll get out of here. I mean, we gotta do it if we want to know whether or not we can trust Ground News. So as with the rest, the About page, what do you know? 100% independent, human driven. Funding, we received 0 from corporations, foundations, organizations, wealthy investors, and advocacy groups. I will check the details. Credibility, not who owns them, but by its track record, and they're recommended by one of their NewsGuard, so one of their competitors. That's relevant. So their funding, again, they say 100% independent, 35% advertising. 2 third-party advertising companies. I mean, the third-party advertising is great. It's like any YouTubers, you don't actually talk to the people doing the advertising. You just get the advertising through Google or whatever. And so you only deal with that third party and not with the actual advertisers. So you're not beholden to them in any way. 65% from membership fees, 5% from donations, and that equals 105% somehow. But either way, that's pretty cool. On to methodology. Updated methodology reduces influence of strictly US-centric political spectrum, primarily tailored to the political landscape of the US. Human reviewers conduct all evaluations. Doesn't even say anything about how they lean or anything. It says volunteers. And then they give this huge, long list of how they go about doing their methodology. It is comprehensive. I will give them that. So again, I like how transparent they are. I do like their methodology. You can go and read it on your own. Links to these sites will be in the description if you want to know more. But yeah, overall their methodology is thorough and it's human driven, and this one doesn't have any monetary influence whatsoever. Dave Van Zandt is the founder and primary editor for Sources. He's assisted by a collective of volunteers and paid contractors. So what's the deal? Can we trust him? No, not at all. I mean, they don't tell us about their methodology. They tell us what 3 companies they use, but they don't tell us how they go about averaging them out or anything like that. They don't tell us who owns them. They don't tell us how they're funded. They just tell us 18 investors, trust us. Whereas their own sources, their own partners who they use for their methodology are way more transparent. Ground themselves knows the importance of who owns a company and how they're funded. I mean, that's what they do. It's kind of ridiculous they're not more clear about these things. Now, is it a useful tool? That's an entirely different question. Which, short answer is yes, I think it is. And if you want a video about why I think it is, let me know in the comments. Also, if you want me to look into whether or not these other companies have apps or how to use them or deep dive into them, let me know that in the comments. Other than that, it's been fun. Let me leave you with one last little fun tidbit of information. Now, while I was researching, I found their terms of service. And if you scroll way down here, reliance on information posted. The information presented on or through the company properties are made available solely for general information purposes. We do not warrant the accuracy, completeness, or usefulness of this information. Now that's quite the admission there. And I mean, just one more piece of food for thought. Where are they getting all this money for advertising? They sure are spending it all over the place. So with that being said, I hope this little rabbit hole here has helped you understand whether or not you can trust Ground News, but I also hope it's given you a little insight into critical thinking. Thanks for watching, and until next time, don't let them do your thinking for you.